Welcome to the Mint Museum for our 2012 ARTSspeak at the DNC, a policy discussion about the arts and arts education. The arts are, in many ways, our biggest secret weapon, and we need to make it less secret, and that's why we're doing panels like this. I want to mention that this event is being produced with some very important partners. Our local partners, the Arts and Science Council, Scott Provencher and Robert Bush are both here, helped us a great deal. And one of the things I'll say is that you can tell how hard they're working. As I sat down on my plane here, US Airways, I picked out the magazine, and in there I saw an 8-page spread about the arts in this city, including this museum, and it credited the great work that the Arts and Science Council had done. And they must have been so political that they actually had quotes from our organization in there about the economic impact of the arts. So it was absolutely terrific. The other local partner I want to mention is this wonderful Mint Museum itself, and Dr. Kathleen Jameson and her work in allowing us to be here. NAMM, the National Association of Music Merchants, fabulous organization. Here, Joe Lamond, Mary Larson, Leo Coco, our partners in making this happen. The Great United States Conference of Mayors, our longest term ally in fighting for more support for the arts. Tom Cochran and Tom McClellan are here. You can find Tom in a white suit if you want to talk to anybody later.
All white.
After Labor Day.
The Recording Academy, the Grammys, Darryl Friedman, who has been instrumental in helping us with this and with the music for Arts Jam later tonight. And our own Americans for the Arts Action Fund. Ken Ferguson, the chairman of our board, is here with us, and Nina Oslu-Tuncelli and her great team of a half a dozen folks, Narek, Gladstone, Jay, Victoria, Kate, and John, who helped put this together. The Arts Action Fund, for which I serve as president and CEO, is the largest grassroots arts advocacy organization in the country. Membership is free. We wanted to make it accessible, and we thought free was a pretty good way to start. And I hope you will all consider joining as we reach our goal of amassing 1 million members of the Arts Action Fund who we can contact easily to take action when there's an arts or an arts education issue. This event is our opportunity to highlight the arts and arts education issues to Democratic leaders. And the message goes beyond what is spoken in this room, in this museum. This conversation taking place at the largest convening of the National Democratic Party will be shared again and again with over 200,000 of our Arts Action Fund network of grassroots advocates and communities across the country.
You know, the goal today for me, and I've tried to think through what is it I hope to accomplish by assembling this panel. I mean, it's kind of inspiring and awe-inspiring, actually, is a better word. But so if we can share some ideas from the federal level, state level, down to the local level, I'm hoping that you may see how all this threads together. You know, include the corporate world, and I represent business guys, and we are really incented to see the arts, community, music education, all that grow. Technically, we have a vested interest in that. And some might say, is that a bad thing or a good thing? I think it's a good thing. I think if you want long-term sustainability, you need partners who are vested on all sides. And from the members of NAMM, companies like, you know, make all the guitars and pianos and sell them. We have some of our NAMM members here today. We are here for the long haul. And this is something important. I think the merging of these ideas. I think the second goal I'd like to really try and do today is help define an end zone. I struggle with arts sometimes to deciding what is the target. And if I can't define the target, how do I galvanize everybody to move in the same direction? If I can't define the end zone, it's right there, guys, and we're going that way. And here's how we'll know along the way. Here's when we're at the 80-yard line, 90-yard line. We need to know and be able to communicate. So I'm hoping that some of the dialogue today will be able to start identifying what those end zone posts look like. And I think the third thing that we will be talking about, and I'm sure many of you here today are among the converted, so I probably won't have to spend a lot of time on that. Why is this so important? Why music and arts education is something I'm personally passionate about? Why is it so important? We all know that at the core, music has had an impact on education. It defines sometimes students' ability to acquire the math and reading skills they need, which we're measuring and looking at so heavily. It defines a student sometimes whether they stay in school and whether they go on to college. And it defines, I think, nothing defines our 21st century workforce better when we're looking for creativity, innovation, the ability to work in teams than a music and arts background. So I think that why it's so important almost goes without saying. There's a great little story that Sir Ken Robinson tells when we talk about music in the brain and the creativity of a child. And it's something about a young girl in kindergarten, and she's in her first class and they're drawing, and the teacher looks over the student's shoulder and says, "My dear, what are you drawing?" And she goes, "I'm drawing a picture of God." And the teacher goes, "Well, but nobody knows what gods look like." And she goes, "Well, they will in a minute." That's the creativity and innovation that comes from the backbone of music and arts education. So I'll start with you, Secretary Riley, our first victim. You and I have been working together for 8 years now on the Hill, trying to advocate for music and arts in the federal legislation for education. Tell us a little bit about how you see, as a former education secretary, you helped write some of the things we're dealing with now, and now you see us shape it or try and shape it for arts going forward. Can you give us a little overview of what you see as the state of play today and what might be happening next?
Well, I'd be glad to, and it's a real pleasure for me and all my colleagues here, especially the pleasure for Madeleine, which she and I serve the cabinet together. My tell you that Joe is a professional drummer, and Madeleine claims to be a drummer. Joe, I think, really needs a lesson.
We have the YouTube video.
So drumming is art. See, drumming is art. Let's look at the system in this country, and I think it's just somewhat complicated, and Joe kind of laid it out a little bit. We have the federal, the state, and the local level. And the policy in terms of education that certainly that impacts arts and music really emanates generally from the federal government. That's kind of where it's set, not all cases, but generally. And then the state in this country really has a responsibility for quality public education for all children. They have responsibility for public education. I put the word quality in there because that's what it ought to be. Local schools, man, have a great responsibility because that's where it takes place.
But really, I'm grateful to be here, and thank you very much. Dave is the one who really prompted all this and has been a very, very good friend. I will take it, you spoke about local, state, and federal level. I think you can take the issue far to the international level. And I teach a course at Georgetown, and I say foreign policy is just trying to get some country to do what you want. So what are the tools? And in the toolbox is our diplomacy, bilateral and multilateral, and economic tools, and then the use of force. But under diplomacy, I thought that cultural diplomacy was a very important part of the toolbox, of trying to show who we are by the kind of art that we create and are able to inspire people with, and at the same time learn an awful lot about other people's culture by the art that they have. Now, part of it, the press that traveled with me thought that I made this up so that I could go and visit various great historic monuments that other countries had to honor their art. But it's a very important aspect when you go somewhere to go and see the pyramids or Angkor Wat or various aspects. And so one of the things that we did was some trilateral diplomacy with the Canadians and Mexicans. So I went to Oaxaca to look at their monuments, and we went to Vancouver to listen to throat singing, which is a rather peculiar form. And then we had our meeting in Santa Fe to explain our art. So there were any number of different aspects of cultural diplomacy. One of the very, very important other parts of diplomacy is jazz. And I'm honored to have any part with the Thelonious Monk Institute, but I can tell you from my own experience. I was born in Czechoslovakia, and during the 60s, a lot of the dissident movements had to do with music. And what happened was that the musicians in Czechoslovakia at the time originally were jazz musicians, and then they decided that they wanted to have a political voice, and so they created the jazz section. And their most prized literature was Rolling Stones magazines in various aspects. They were an underground movement. And it made me realize the extent to which jazz speaks for America and is the example of our freedom. And when other countries want to play American jazz music, it is their expression of how they consider themselves free. So when the Thelonious Monk Institute came to me when I was Secretary of State and said, would you host a reception for us at the State Department, we started that. There have never been so many musicians at the State Department. So I have been now with Secretary Colin Powell, we are co-sponsors of this, and then this year, they are in fact giving me the award. My nickname is Sticks. I have to tell you a story what happened. Chris Bodie was at the White House playing for the Chinese State Dinner, and he plays the trumpet in the most amazing way. And so when he was giving a concert at the Kennedy Center, he said, I went down to say hello to him. The head of China, he said, well, sometimes when I have somebody in the audience who is a named person, I ask them to come down and play drums with me. Would you do that? And I said, sure. I thought the people with me would faint. So I did. I played drums at the Kennedy Center with Chris Bodie. And so this year they always honor a particular instrument. And so this year it's the drum. So they asked me if I would play, so I have to practice because I
Was that a great memory though, looking out over the crowd behind the drum set? It doesn't get any better than that.
It was fun. I mean, it really was fun. But you mentioned my pins, and if I might, and I think that in many ways, the pins are an example that anybody can have fun with art.
You know, the people look around and decide, is this where I want to live and work? And is this where I can see my family growing and prospering? So it is paramount that we look to ensure that our cities and towns are the best they can be. We talk about the arts and our culture and our heritage in terms of quality of life often. People, I think, sometimes use that as a crutch because it gives them the opportunity to step away from that at times when the economy is not the best, when decisions have to be made about how we spend our resources. So one of the things that we did in 2009 was to collaborate with our Department of Commerce to produce the first ever economic impact study on the arts and culture in North Carolina. It represents over 5.5% of our total employment in North Carolina. So you can get a sense that, wow, you look at it as an industry, as jobs, as economic impact, and you can see that as an industry itself, it is extremely impactful. And then when you think about the collateral benefit of a strong arts and culture community, and you realize just how powerful and important it is. And that message has really served us well, particularly over the past 2 years, as we talk about the bottom line of what our arts and culture means to our states, to our businesses, and to our communities. I can tell you that over the last 2 years, probably one of the most frequent things that I've heard as we've met and talked with legislators, many of whom we knew in Raleigh. My Chief Deputy Secretary, Melanie, is back there somewhere, and she and I are doing that work with our legislators. And one of the frequent messages we've been given is, you know, I really don't love the arts. I'm sorry. And I'm not sure if it was stupidity or brilliance, you can choose, but in the middle of one of those meetings where, again, one of the legislators said to me, you know, I just don't love the arts. And I looked at him and said, I don't care. What I do care about, and this is the message, what I do care about is that you value the arts. Value the arts. You don't have to love the symphony. You don't have to enjoy art. You don't have to go to the theater regularly to know what people up here know from a business perspective, from a leadership perspective, and that is that our arts and culture is paramount at telling our story, at making our communities the best they can possibly be.
When I knew that when you have budget challenges, the first things to be cut are the arts. And on my watch, I was going to do everything I could to fight for the arts. So we came up with this initiative called For Art's Sake. And the neat thing about it is when I went out and talked to the business community said, look, we will, and I'm sure Jim's going to talk about it a little bit, but the business community said, look, we will support arts, but don't just talk about arts from a creative standpoint. Talk about arts in terms of the jobs that it creates. Talk about art in terms of direct and indirect, economic impact. And when you start doing that, you start getting fans from an art standpoint that are much broader than just those who are creative like Bernie, who I'm not quite as creative as he is, but you start getting a bigger fan base. So what we did was we created an initiative called For Art's Sake, and we got the whole community in Sacramento that loved the arts. We convened every month for 9 months, and we created an action plan called For Art's Sake. And on one particular meeting, there was a guy named Michael Kaiser. Do you know who Michael Kaiser is? He runs the Kennedy Arts Center. And he said, if you're that serious, we're going to do something in Sacramento that we've done nowhere else in the country. And I'm like, I'm in. So we have something called Any Given Child in Sacramento. It's the first city in the country that a city has partnered with the Kennedy Center that art education will be accessible to all children in Sacramento. Like, how cool is that for a community?
One of the things that I'm looking for is, quite frankly, what I call the bullseye, which is if you imagine 3 kind of different circles starting to move in together where they do have some overlap, that overlap starts to form integration, it starts to form collaboration, that type of thing. We are like most other companies that have a national brand. We are looking at the investment. It gets written up a lot of times in arts journals and philanthropy journals, saying that the only thing corporations want now is proof to the bottom line. You want to be able to reach a sort of demographic audience. You want brand awareness. You want this number of tickets with your logo on it. Those things are important, and we appreciate those things. But quite frankly, that's kind of baseline in the price of entry. That's one circle. It's really your marketing metrics. The other circle that we really start to focus on at the local level is what we call social investment or social capital. We really want to make sure that those students in schools are having access to arts education. We really want to make sure that students and individuals in our community that maybe don't typically have accessibility to experience the arts have a chance to do that. One of my mentors within the company that works in philanthropy, she challenged me my first year in the role, and she said, well, you've got these 3 arts organizations that you're funding and supporting. What's your BIS strategy? And I said, my business strategy? And she said, no, your butts and seats strategy. And she was literally saying, what are you doing in your role to drive audience development, to make sure that people in your community are coming and are experiencing the arts? And so part of our job and my challenge in my role is really, quite frankly, to drive collaboration and integration. And we are just as concerned about audience development as many of the arts groups here are in the city, whether you're a museum or you're performing arts or you're visual arts or a photography center, whatever. So that's another piece of it. And then to kind of bring the conversation together with what I've been hearing from the other panelists, another very important aspect for us is helping to drive the local creative economy. So here, Jim Rogers has the same concern that we do in hiring and recruiting top talent.
So I wonder if you could share a little bit about how music and sports came together in your life, that through some very improbable path in 2012 you find yourself here in Charlotte, North Carolina with us.
I feel quite honored to be on this very impressive panel, and I do appreciate your efforts, the level that you are making. International level, to the corporate level, financial level, to make sure that arts have art treated with the value that it deserves. It deserves a lot of my admiration. I really appreciate from an former art student, more specifically in music. And I remember as a kid, putting things together, how the value of consistency and discipline. And the rewards that I had, from learning an instrument, and the more work that I put in, the more I could get out, and making my parents feel proud of my accomplishments in music and sports. Music had a lot to do with it. Now that I look back in hindsight, one of the things that I learned in music is the timing. In life, everything is about timing. The right note at the right time can make a lot of difference. The right swing at the right time, the right word at the right time.
The first thing I would say is welcome to Charlotte. The second thing I would say is it's an honor for me to be on this panel, and it's also a great honor for me to be with all of y'all today. I'm so delighted to see the number of people in this city and enjoying our city. But let me just give you a snapshot of Charlotte through my eyes, but also through the interplay of the community, corporations, and CEOs in terms of how they work together. Charlotte has no real reason to be here. It's not on the river. It was a training center. It was a commercial outpost. And through the years, it's evolved and continuously reinvented itself. This is the future of living in America and around the world. To have the integrations of the arts with business and with where you live is so vital and so key to, I think, the future. The important point is to be really integrated within the community, because at the end of the day, the most important thing we can do is provide financial support, to provide leadership, so that we can develop a world-class arts organizations in our community.
In the end zone, there's mileposts along the way. Name me, give us, in your opinion, one of the signs that we're reaching the end zone, and maybe even what mile or what yard marker that might be. I'll give you an example. For me, it might be every job application in our country has a question which asks the applicant what music or art they're involved in. That might be on the 50-yard line. That's a midpoint of where we're getting to the end zone, where art is truly infused into our culture. Do I go first?
Public schools understand and integrate the value of arts in education.
What yard?
That's close to the end zone.
Go ahead, Linda.
Oh. I thought you were speaking to me. I would say for us, it would be something that's similar to the zone, and that is that if we can get arts integrated in our schools so that every child gets the opportunity, we will in fact have fixed a lot of the other issues that we have. And I think someone said earlier that by virtue of children having those opportunities, they stay in school, their SAT scores go up, their overall performance goes up. And what we find in the A+ Schools program, which is very exciting to me, is we also have teachers who are happier and more satisfied. That means a lot in terms of education. And we get greater community involvement in those schools where we have arts integrated. So it's not just that individual child that's impacted, it's the greater community as well. And I would agree with that. I think because of the incentive factor.
Secretary Albright, other than being the road drummer for Brandon Marcel, what would be your image here?
Well, I think it is when we realize that, to stay in the international realm, that having a concert at a state dinner is a sign of our strength and not some frivolity. That we consider it our best export product. That we see ourselves as being exceptionally proud of the diversity of our musical talent and our art and our architecture. And that art is not viewed as a luxury, that it is viewed as central to our lives, that it is a necessity. It's as important as breathing and eating, and it is really not just an extra.
That is the end.
My view is, my hope for our community, for our country, and for the world is that we never get to the end zone. I hope we're always 30 yards away, always striving, always reaching, always reinventing, always challenging, and always pushing the end zone further and further out on the horizon. And to me, that's the best way forward.
Well done. What would I say to you?
What? Ditto. When I think about arts, it's, art, three things. Arts is a convener of people, right? It brings us together of all different shades and hues, which is powerful. Arts is a conveyor of culture, that it helps tell our story from one generation to the next, which is pretty powerful. And then arts is also a communicator of ideas. And Secretary Albright said earlier, the freedom of expression allows us to say what's on our mind and talk about things in a different way that we might not be able to do otherwise. So for me, at the end of the day, I just want all children to have access to an art teacher, whether it be fine arts or performing arts or visual arts or literary arts. I think if we can create an environment where all of our children understand that art matters, we'll be inside in 20.
Secretary Well, you mentioned 2008, which was a difficult time for this country. And I was very proud of our president. When in 2008, we faced a very, very difficult situation that were placed upon him, and we Democrats think as a result of some Bush years. We think that's very clear. When that was placed upon him, he had the courage to say, even in these difficult times, close to the 33-year depression, I'm going to emphasize quality public schools, quality public education. Quality public education includes the arts. I'm kind of the governmental person here, so I'm talking a little bit bureaucracy. I apologize for that, that's not my part. But I was so proud of the courage that President Obama had when he stood up for education in the most difficult time of all. He said, we're going to fund education. Education is what's about learning in the arts and culture and all of that, part of it. And we're going to fund it right in the middle of this very difficult time. And I was proud as I can be, and all of us should have the courage to back up arts and music in those difficult times and in good times.
To me, it's just to take art and music to the inner city, to the people that, the kids that can't afford it. I am a product of an effort that the government made, and I was a product of a performing arts high school funded by the government. Had I not been there, I wouldn't be able to afford, and have the exposure that I had to arts. And even though I didn't become an artist up until later in my life, my experience with arts shaped me to be the person that I am today. We're in the end zone there. I think that would be my ultimate goal, to have all of those, especially the ones that cannot afford it, to be exposed to that experience.